It is a medical disaster. It's a pandemic, actually. It's like an illness all over the world of overprescription of drugs. And the reason is partly because doctors don't think what they're prescribing, number one. Number two, pushing by the drug companies. Number two, and number three, not enough research. Well, Librium and Valium were enormously successful, and Valium actually became the most prescribed drug in the whole world. They had advertised and paid for conferences and all sorts of things, and they had reps who used to come round to every GP practice, give them free presents and all that. And so that they were pushed, and the doctors, of course, were very willing to have a safer drug, and they just didn't think what it might be doing, although it seemed to me it was perfectly obvious.
The drugs are anxiolytic and hypnotic, relieving acute anxiety and insomnia. But disastrously, the actual use has been extended by doctors, used as a muscle relaxant and for pains, sports injuries, normal life stresses like bereavement, tinnitus, and in my case it was for Meniere's disease, an inner ear problem. Despite overwhelming evidence of dangers, doctors, health authorities and governments have failed to protect citizens from this crime against humanity. Unbelievably, after more than 50 years, new victims worldwide every year are being led by their doctors into this vortex of pain and suffering, completely avoidable if prescribing is sharply curtailed by law and patients, by law, are clearly and strongly warned of the dangers.
People taking the benzodiazepines, many of them by that time had taken it long term, years and years. I mean, I've seen people who've been on it for 20 years or more, and they realized that after a while the drugs didn't work anymore. And not only that, they were getting iller. And the patients that were referred to me were referred by the doctor because they said, look, there's something wrong with these drugs. I'm getting worse instead of better.
What kind of symptoms were people suffering from when they came to your clinic?
Well, all sorts of things. They were very, very anxious, all of them, and they couldn't sleep, and they got nightmares and dreams, and they were jittery, and some of them had a tremor. They developed agoraphobia, social phobias, some of them paranoid, some of them very angry, sort of rage, and with sensory disturbances, so that light seemed too bright, the room walls seemed to be sloping, you know, all these sort of strange things. Some of them were afraid they were going mad, and sounds too bright, and tinnitus, their ears ringing, and all sorts of things. And in addition to that, tremors and muscle spasms, patches of numbness, muscle pains, muscle jerks, a whole host of symptoms, both physical and mental.
In some cases, I think you suggested it was 10 to 15% of those suffering from withdrawal symptoms. They have protracted withdrawal symptoms. The symptoms go on for longer than a year, and sometimes for years, and possibly even permanently.
Yes, that's only an estimate though. There were some who didn't seem to recover fully, but most of them lost their anxiety. But there were people who still had muscle pains, muscle spasms, mostly physical things actually, but they'd lost their anxiety and depression and nightmares and all those. The mental systems went, but the physical symptoms tended to be long-term. Some people do get permanent, feels like permanent symptoms. We don't know the causes of them. Nobody's ever looked at them. So we just need to do some research on that, but we haven't.
As you know, I myself am suffering from long-term side effects of benzodiazepines. It means that I can't walk very much. In some cases, I can't walk at all. I'm suffering from electric currents running through my body, also electric shocks. Is that common? Have you come across those kind of symptoms in your work?
Well, yes, I have, certainly, and those ones do seem to be protracted. And the interesting thing is, in this age where everybody's having antidepressants now, SSRIs like Prozac, they can produce similar symptoms, including this electricity feeling. And one wonders that if we ever get rid of benzos, whether another lot of drugs won't take over and be just as bad. Certainly some of the short-acting Prozac-like drugs are. And yes, I've had patients with sort of explosive headaches, as if there's an electric current running up and boom, like a thunderclap in the brain, yes. But it's, as you say, it's hidden because people say, oh, you look well, but they don't know what you're feeling like inside.
The symptoms are myriad. In her clinic, Professor Ashton recorded the many distressing conditions.
Pain, limbs, back and neck. Pain, teeth and jaw. Paresthesia, stabbing pins and needles. Limbs and face. Stiffness, limbs, back and jaw. Tremor, muscle pain, twitches. Dizziness, tinnitus. Hypersensitivity to sound, light, touch and taste. Fits, seizures. Anxiety, depression, poor memory and concentration, insomnia, nightmares, hallucinations, agoraphobia and other phobias, panic attacks and palpitations, abdominal pain, diarrhea, constipation. All patients complained of difficulty walking. This appeared to result from a combination of sensory disturbance, muscle weakness, pain and stiffness. Pain in various parts of the body was prominent. Neck pain and occipital headache, pain in the limbs described as aching, bursting, cutting, were all common and often severe. Paresthesiae. All patients had feelings of pins and needles, tingling, crawling in the skin, numbness or altered sensation at some time, usually affecting the limbs in a glove and stocking distribution.
As the eminent Irish expert Dr. John O'Connor says about benzodiazepine withdrawal, the body becomes its own personal torture chamber.
Some of these symptoms were really terrifying for the people suffering them. And in some cases, people were actually becoming disabled. Isn't that the case?
Oh, it certainly was. I mean, because these symptoms could be quite overwhelming, were very severe. There were even suicides. People got very depressed and led to the breakup of families, marriages, you became impossible to work. You lost your job, you lost your income very often, and also it was difficult to get any compensation because nobody realized it was a real illness. But there have been suicides, usually in withdrawal, but sometimes when you're still taking them.
In Newcastle, Professor Ashton wrote her now famous manual on benzodiazepines, describing the symptoms and showing how to withdraw slowly. It's free on the internet. A book could have made her a fortune. It's the Bible worldwide for victims of doctor-induced benzodiazepine illness. Professor Ashton became a medical advisor and friend to victims everywhere. This is a bound volume of some of the thousands of letters and emails she's received from all over the world, made by a grateful patient. The consultant who recommended I take Valium for Meniere's disease brushed aside my concern, saying it was a most maligned drug that could be a preventative against Meniere's attacks. He stopped prescribing Valium for Meniere's now, a lesson learned at a huge cost to me. When I started getting darting pains in my legs, I searched the web and in shock found the Ashton manual, which explained what was happening to me.
You wrote the Ashton manual, which was published on the web. It's about benzodiazepines, how they work, and also about how to withdraw from benzodiazepines. Why did you do that? Was it in response to a very big need?
Well, yes, because the patients seem to know more than the doctors. They all of them said the reason they'd come here was they got no help from their GP or from a psychiatrist. I had patients referred from psychiatrists even, and the patients seemed to know better than the doctors. And so I wrote that manual for patients who couldn't get help from their doctors. It was for them. And the interesting thing is, although patients all over the world have snapped it up, the doctors still don't read it. The patients themselves usually started setting up their own support groups. And it was they, and still is, support groups who get more people off and give them more support than any doctor, because there are no NHS clinics now.
Can you describe in simple terms what is happening in our brains with these psychoactive drugs?
Well, the benzodiazepines enhance the actions of an important neurotransmitter, that's a chemical in the brain that normally has an inhibitory or calming effect. And so the way they work initially is very clever because they just they up this effect of calming all over the brain. So they relieve tension, they affect balance, like alcohol, and they affect thinking and sensations and brain function everywhere. And then, but the body is much cleverer than people think, because it says, hey, there's a foreign body here, a thing called a benzo. I'm going to adapt to it. And so they downregulate these receptors. And in the end, the drug doesn't work anymore because they've stopped this enhancement. And so the patient starts to get withdrawal symptoms, saying, hey, I need some more of that stuff. So very often the dose has to be escalated to get the same effect. And if it isn't, people get what are withdrawal symptoms, even though they're on the same dose. We'd go to detoxes. They've got lots of detox places in America. They take you off quickly. Well, that's hopeless because it doesn't give you time to get the equilibrium to swing back. You can't do that quickly. If you stop benzos suddenly, you get fits and it can kill you, incidentally. So that's why you have to withdraw slowly.
So we shouldn't be interfering with this evolutionary process in the brain. We do so at our peril.
I think so, yes, I'm sure. So it's taken millions of years to get such a good organ, a good instrument as we've got in our heads. And if we mess it up, it's just stupid, really.
Can we look now at the possibility of long-term brain damage caused by benzodiazepines? In your view, is this possible? And if it is possible, are there ways and techniques available now today, research techniques, which could prove or disprove this?
Yes, one could certainly these days with modern techniques. People have told me you could easily tell in animals whether the receptors for benzodiazepines change if you feed them benzos for a long time, and whether it comes back. So some don't come back to normal, so your nervous system can't function as normal.
So you say that there are these research techniques now which would be very good at illustrating if there's a change, long-term changes in the functions of brains as a result of taking them now.
We could. Actually, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that in all the literature telling you how to prescribe drugs, they all say that benzodiazepines are for short-term use only, 2 to 4 weeks maximum. And even the company that makes them says that, but it's just that nobody takes any notice.